All right, so we're going to talk about a Cardano ecosystem today and maybe how Cardano and the partners that are starting to circulate around this project are really coming to market. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back to TechPath. Today we're going to dive in a little deeper on a project called SundaeSwap. It's a great name. You guys have probably heard this if you are a Cardanian. Is it Cardanian? I'm trying to remember all of the cult names that are out there with the Cardano stealth force that seems to come around our channel a lot. But today we're going to join us is Pi Lanningham, who is the Chief Information Officer over at SundaeSwap. Great to have you on the show, Pi.
Hi, Paul. Great to be on. I'm really excited.
Yeah, excellent. Pi, let's get into, for our viewers and our listeners, because this also goes out on the podcast waves over on Spotify and all that good stuff. For our viewers and listeners, let's talk a little bit about SundaeSwap as a whole. What is it? How does it connect in with Cardano? What is the relationship there? Can you kind of give us a little bit more on that?
Yeah, for sure. So SundaeSwap is a decentralized exchange. This kind of serves the same user need as something like Robinhood or New York Stock Exchange, but without a kind of central owner. So there's
Right.
no company that's brokering trades, and there's no kind of trades are matched algorithmically. Our goal at SundaeSwap is to decentralize not just the access to financial services for the billions of unbanked people in the world, but also to decentralize the profits from them that are usually enjoyed by this industry.
Yeah.
And so, like many decentralized exchanges, we have a profit sharing mechanism where the profits that are collected from the volume of trades go to our users. And it really fills that basic need of, I have coin A and I want coin B. How do I get from there?
So, with the DEX, a lot of our viewers, they're utilizing DEXs all the time. They're, in some cases getting into DeFi platforms and ecosystems. Really, I would say they, for most part, our users are a little bit more mature in their life cycle of their crypto journey. Though we do have some new viewers out there, what is the advantage of a DEX versus, say, going into a centralized exchange, let's say a Coinbase or someone like a Kraken, et cetera?
Yeah, so somebody like a Coinbase has an outsized power over your funds. So that means that you kind of deposit your funds with them, and they are the kind of guardian and custodian of those funds until you withdraw them. And they're also the guardian and custodian over the market. So they could choose to match orders in an unfair way. Now, they're a big business and they make a lot of money doing what they do, so they likely aren't going to do that. But it does impose upon them, because they have this huge responsibility and this huge power. It does impose upon them huge regulatory requirements. And I think you see this with them butting heads at the SEC all the time and things like that. And so the hypothesis behind a DEX is that by removing any entity that has that kind of outsized power, you also reduce or remove the need for that to be as heavily regulated. And that
Right.
means that you have less operational costs. It means that you have a lower barrier to entry for users. You don't necessarily have know your customer KYC requirements, things like that. And so for the kind of it fills two roles of, it just builds a better product for the end user, because you've cut out all these middlemen, and two, it kind of it satisfies that kind of paranoia that a lot of people and I say that not disparagingly, that people in crypto have over kind of access to their funds and their money, and it builds that financial freedom.
I look at the scenarios when you look at, DEX usage or something like a centralized exchange, and we've been testing a lot of different wallets here. So a good example is using a MetaMask or using a Coinbase wallet, which is the wallet scenario, and just transferring funds in and out, even if you're going back from, Coinbase wallet over to Coinbase, those kind of things. So traditional financial movements that are to a certain extent, expected by most of the, especially the entrants into the market that we're seeing right now during this current bull run, meaning people that have maybe not been in crypto, they're coming into the market for the first time. They're learning about all these different things, centralized exchanges, decentralized exchanges, how to use a wallet, all those steps that really have to take place. From a security standpoint on a DEX, when you look at what you guys are doing with SundaeSwap, how well is the security architecture on DEXs? And explain to me kind of the connection of utilizing Cardano as the core blockchain element within this one. Where are the benefits to that for a user that's coming in off the street saying, hey, I'm jumping into crypto for the first time. I do want to do something on a DEX. I've learned a little bit about it. That's the route I want to take. Why say, let's go with SundaeSwap?
Yeah. So I will kind of start from the security aspect and broaden out from there. So one thing that I have said in a number of interviews, and I kind of stand by, is that in the same way that the US dollar used to be backed by gold,
Right.
crypto is back, its underlying asset is trust, right? And so security and trust is what gives crypto its value.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hyper critical for any project to build up that trust and to build up that security and to not only achieve it, but demonstrate it to its users. At SundaeSwap, we're doing a number of things to address that. So first, a lot of the work is already done for us. Cardano is a very kind of research heavy and kind of slow and steady wins the race blockchain. They often get a lot of slack for having taken so long to kind of deliver smart contracts, for example. But the flip side to that is that the security built into the system is far higher than what I would expect out of another blockchain. So their whole networking stack is formally verified. They are one of the most peer-reviewed and researchers in the industry, things like that. So whereas building kind of a banking stack from scratch might take us 6 years, we've been able to build on that foundation of Cardano and have kind of a core fundamental platform for building software, so to speak.
Right.
To be able to build this, we got started in April, and we're now kind of nearing a finished product. And so the fact that we've been able to move so quickly and have so much assurance on that foundation layer has been phenomenal.
Yeah.
The next layer of what we're doing for security at SundaeSwap is we are getting an audit, and so this is kind of a very expensive and long running process where another company comes in with some fresh eyes and some kind of really deep experience in both mathematics and security engineering, and we did it in 2 phases. So we did a design audit where the company that's working with us, Runtime Verification, reviewed kind of the high level proposal for how our protocol is going to work. They found kind of some small denial of service issues, and so we worked with them to address those. And then we're going and implementing it, and then we're going to start a second round of that audit, which is the code review, and it says, does this implement the spec we agreed on, and kind of does it have any security flaws or kind of opportunities to exploit. And so we're taking security very seriously at SundaeSwap, and I think that's just one of the kind of myriad of ways that that sets us apart. If you're looking for other ways to kind of look to SundaeSwap, one of the biggest ones is the difference between Ethereum and Cardano again. So Cardano has much lower fees and much more predictable fees. So whereas on Ethereum, sometimes you can submit your transaction and it can still fail and you lose your funds, Cardano is designed in such a way that effectively, unless you're a malicious actor, that can't happen. Your transaction can still fail and be rejected, but you don't lose your funds in the process because any of the kind of things that can cause it to fail that are outside of your control are kind of validated before they do the heavy lifting of checking the contract. And the contracts are totally deterministic. So you can run them locally and know whether they're going to succeed or fail and submit them. And the only way that you can lose kind of your collateral and your gas fees is if you intentionally constructed a transaction that fails. And so that kind of predictability and that determinism, and that lower fees overall, I think makes Cardano and the premier DEX on Cardano, which we hope to be SundaeSwap, the a great choice for high volume DeFi.
I think you're right. When you look at DEXs, the key here, I don't know that a lot of investors or in general, people in crypto, maybe for the first time, I think the legacy players in crypto understand DEXs. There's a certain amount of risk, but at the same time, if you've got something like what you guys are doing that's really layered in with a load of security, it starts to open up the opportunity for people to really get more comfortable utilizing a DEX versus, say, a traditionalized, centralized exchange. So I think that's something that once we break down past those, and it seems like you and other projects that are really addressing this are absolutely going in that direction. I want to talk about your fundraise. So you guys did an early fundraise, which included, looks like capital raised through seed funding. This was like $1.5 million, but it's startup scope companies. You guys were on with, let's see, who was our team there? Yeah, okay, so it was Alameda Research, Double P Group, David Roebuck, principal at Wave Financial. So a pretty good roster here in terms of raising, at least a seed level round of capital. What is the next phase for you? Because seed stage, we see this in the startup or in Silicon Valley. Often it's usually, the very early stages. How close are you guys to what they call an MVP, a minimal viable product for the marketplace to be active?
Yeah, so our fundraise, like you mentioned, was very exciting for us, and I just kind of want to touch on that for a second. So cFund, for those who aren't aware, stands for Cardano Fund. It's under Wave Capital, but it's anchored by Charles Hoskinson himself, the creator of Cardano, which means that 10% or more of the assets in that fund are Charles Hoskinson's. And so while it's not necessarily an endorsement from Charles or anything like that, he remains very ecosystem neutral.
Right.
It does come with some amount of pedigree of a tacit endorsement of our project. I want to be very careful never to put words in Charles's mouth. But the other kind of groups are also very interesting. So Alameda Research, we're Alameda's first Cardano investment, and so we're very excited about being the team that breaks that bubble. And when we went and spoke to VCs, we dealt with a lot of yes, SundaeSwap, maybe or no Cardano. A lot of people, a lot of VCs right now are very skeptical of Cardano. And so we were very excited to have popped that bubble and hopefully bring more money into the Cardano ecosystem for our project or for other projects, because a rich and connected and successful, thriving DeFi, they say a rising tide raises all boats. Speaking about next steps, so the next step is very much our launch and our MVP. And so we're working very hard. I'm actually quite a bit tired from working late last night, but we're working very hard towards that launch. Originally, we had targeted that for sometime in October, but that was always kind of a very tentative date, and that's looking pretty tight right now. So it will most likely be later than that. I don't want to give a hard date until we can kind of definitively say. But once we do that launch, that's kind of the first version of the protocol. And we've designed the protocol to be upgradable. So one of the very painful things that Uniswap went through and arguably still is going through is their upgrade from V2 to V3, in that they had to convince everybody to move their funds over. And so effectively they were competing with themselves. And so the way that we've designed SundaeSwap is to have a governance model where holders of the Sundae token can vote on upgrades. And so our role as a software development company post-launch becomes basically like a software consultancy employed by the Sundae DAO. And so we're going to be building services on top of Sundae, the protocol. Things like, maybe I shouldn't mention specific features that might get me in trouble, but you can imagine things that are less regulatorily sensitive, that don't need to be fully decentralized, that kind of do analytics over kind of your
Right.
portfolio or something like that. And then we also plan to build and propose upgrades to the protocol, just like anybody else in the community can. And so this can introduce things like yield farming, and we're looking at layer 2 solutions in the long term as well. Because one thing that's pretty clear to us is that if you look at kind of the volume that the number of trades that Uniswap deals with on a day-to-day basis, or the number of trades that we'll be able to deal with on a day-to-day basis, it's nowhere near kind of the kind of institutional demand or the high frequency trading that the industry really wants to support. And so we're looking at layer 2 solutions using Cardano Hydra and things like that. And so that will also be very exciting for us to tackle.
I like, when we see teams that are really starting to innovate on projects like this, usually the early stage elements are obviously the launch, once you do get the launch, but the fact that you guys are already scaling for upgradability, which I think is what we're seeing in blockchain is that in many cases, if we want to even refer to them as legacy technologies, whether it's Ethereum or even Cardano prior to smart contracts, everybody's looking at just the evolution of where blockchain tech is moving, and it's moving very quickly. Have you guys found, so obviously you're dealing with a lot of probably early stage developers. This is something that I've often wondered, the difference between developing on Solidity or developing on, Haskell, or there's another layer
Mm-hmm.
protocol there that Cardano. What has been that kind of scenario for you, since you are building a team of developers around that? What's been the process?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's an interesting question, and it's got a couple different facets. One thing I like to say is that when Ethereum launched, there were 0 Solidity developers in the world.
Right.
And when Cardano launches, there are thousands of Haskell developers. So in
Mm.
some sense, Cardano is a little bit better off. That being said, Solidity is very similar to kind of more mainstream languages, and so maybe
Right.
the on ramping was more familiar and stuff. Um, all I can say is for Cardano's future, it's very smart of them to plan for kind of a variety of languages. So, we think Haskell and Plutus are great, but if there are other developers who kind of are turned off by that, in the roadmap, Cardano will have, Rust support if somebody wants to build that. It's kind of very extensible in that way. And for SundaeSwap's perspective, we lucked out in that we acquired some really top tier talent early on, and it kind of just all fell into place. And so that is my lead smart contract engineer, Edmund Noble. He's just an absolute genius. We would not be where we are without him. And then also our partnership with M Labs, who is kind of
Mm.
a Haskell consultancy firm who's partnered really closely with IOG and is the consultancy firm behind a lot of these projects. And so the way I structured the team as I started to build it out was I wanted at least one kind of in-house engineer that could own the code and make sure that the long-term viability of it was good, and then kind of pad that out with the consultancy that has the experience in Plutus. And so that has worked really well. And we have high quality code that we're proud of for the contracts, with the fueled by the kind of breadth of knowledge and the and supercharged by the ability to throw quote unquote a lot of bodies at it with MLab's help.
Yeah. I would suggest to our viewers, if you haven't checked out the white paper, you got to go to their website, SundaeSwap, and look at the white paper. It gets a little bit more technical. We won't get into all those details, but there's a really good explanation of how this protocol can really be utilized on the Cardano ecosystem. So if you are a blockchain geek and you're watching our show today, that's the number one thing I always recommend people do is check out the white paper, learn a little bit more about what they're trying to do from that standpoint. Pi, let's jump over to when you look at kind of the future of DEXs in general, decentralized exchanges, there's a lot of there's kind of two camps out there in the crypto verse, and some of which are really leaning heavily toward DEXs, some of which are looking at where the centralized exchanges could be bringing in the masses in terms of major adoption. Because right now we're still at maybe 1 to 2% of the early adopters, like myself and others that are watching this show today, that are completely fine with DEXs in kind of that scenario. What are your thoughts on how DEXs will evolve over the next few years, especially as the financial system starts to get more mature around cryptocurrency in general?
Yeah, I think it really comes in two dimensions. Kind of thinking off the top of my head, the first dimension that DEXs have to solve in order to bring in that kind of institutional partnership is, like I mentioned, scale. The number of trades. Uniswap does really impressive volume because each trade is very big.
Right.
But if you
Yeah.
look at like the number of trades and the frequency of trades, it's frankly abysmal, and that's through no fault of their own. I'm not throwing shade here. And so as DEXs, we have to figure out how do we build something that supports that high frequency trading while still maintaining a global consensus, which is very kind of expensive from a technical standpoint. And so, SundaeSwap is working hard behind the scenes on that problem, kind of post-launch. The second kind of avenue that I think that we have to level up on is in creating a spectrum of a gradient between traditional finance and decentralized finance.
Okay.
So not every investor needs the like totally anonymous, super privacy focused, et cetera, features of a DEX. And to some extent, those are kind of a turnoff, and the kind of stigma around that kind of keeps them away. And so I think a gradient of like a DEX that can provide a gradient where some of the users operate through kind of privacy focused markets, and some of the users operate maybe with lower fees or with higher liquidity through KYC markets and things like that. And so kind of building that ramp and that kind of ability for a user to choose what kind of level of integration with traditional finance and they want is going to be really critical. And so that's another thing that we are thinking about at SundaeSwap, and really excited about things like Cardano's Atala Prism program, which is a decentralized identity solution that allows us to start doing things like, oh, hey, has this person been kind of authenticated by the US government or a KYC firm, without us having to kind of gain access to or potentially lose that information.
That's an interesting point, because I think that's going to be something that we do see an evolution, especially around blockchain in general, because KYC, AML, traditional protocols that have been put in place for most governments, it's that initial, I think, shield that goes up in fear of cryptocurrency taking over and eating the world. I think there is going to be some scenarios where blockchain will really start to kind of break down some of these walls, just in the ability of its one capability to really kind of establish trust between user and the sender, receiver, et cetera. Do you think that we will see any kind of DEX evolution in the traditional finance system as it is today?
Yeah, I think it's unavoidable, and I think that look, the SEC, like them or not, has a very legitimate kind of mandate to protect people from scams and to prevent money laundering and to prevent kind of terrorism funding. I think we can all agree that those are very kind of worthwhile goals to strive for. And so I think because of the uncertainty that sometimes arises out of their kind of them being slow to release kind of guidance around these things, and because some of their enforcements get in the way of the services that people want to use, the SEC gets a really bad rap, and people often kind of rag on the SEC. But I kind of really admire that aspect of what their mandate is. And so my ideal scenario would be for crypto to find a way to work with the SEC to level up their tools for dealing with these very real problems in a modern way, rather than just kind of slamming down the banhammer and saying, it is just against the law to do these things. I think we can come up with far more effective ways to solve these problems. And so I see DeFi in general kind of necessitating that kind of cooperation and that kind of integration with traditional finance, and saying, kind of through some of the measures that I mentioned before, and probably many others that we'll discover over the coming years. And so that's something that SundaeSwap is looking to do, and that's something I think a lot of DEXs will look to do.
I'm very excited about where this is going to take us, because the evolution of just finance in general, especially in the emerging markets, because the unbanked is by far one of still the largest untouched markets in the financial system. But at the same time, in many cases, the tool sets have not been there, even in crypto to a certain extent. We've only seen here recently where crypto has started, including what Charles and IOHK team are doing in Africa, what we've seen in El Salvador, what we're seeing now in some emerging markets that crypto has kind of broken down the walls of traditional finance, really kind of position it. We've talked to many banks here on this show. We've talked to a lot of funds that are working more and more with institutions and financial houses that essentially are in the process of kind of changing their entire mindset around where this is going. So it's going to be fun I think the future is very bright, in the essence of where this is going. Do you think I want to get to our next question here, and that is just, as you look at kind of not only the development, because sometimes I feel like we get in a bubble here within not only our show, but in the industry, very tech focused, very blockchain focused, and kind of forget the masses out there that are consuming the financial products and all the different services products that eventually blockchain will affect. How long do you think it will be before we start to see real migration and adoption into the segment, meaning crypto, that would really start to move things like SundaeSwap and many other DEXs really kind of to the forefront of mainstream news and people understanding it?
Yeah. So I think that if you look at the cycle that crypto is in, and I forget who it was that kind of proposed this model of thinking about kind of technological cycles, but there's this notion of crossing the chasm, which is in the early phases of a project, all of the emphasis and all of the excitement is around the technology and what the technology can accomplish. And I think that's very true of crypto. It was true of the internet in like the 90s. But at some point, it hits an inflection point of adoption where you have to start arguing from a social proof standpoint, right? The excitement has to become more about who is using it and who trusts it, right? And I think crypto is kind of either right at or nearing that inflection point. And so I think crossing that chasm will be a big part of what we see over the next, several years. I don't have a crystal ball. I don't know how long that's going to take. Hopefully less time than not. But that's something that both Cardano and SundaeSwap are very focused on. Is Charles likes to say, and I'll shamelessly steal this: we need to be thinking about the next billion users, and so whether that's from kind of small usability features that kind of on-ramp people who don't understand Web3 wallets and don't understand private keys, and what's the big deal if I lose my private keys? Can't I just recover my account? Like all of that education that needs to happen, all the way up to kind of some of the bigger scale things, like I was talking about with integration with traditional finance and building that bridge over to, when we gain the trust of the Wells Fargo and the JP Morgans, and big money starts really big money starts flowing in, I think then you'll start to see businesses say, okay, the volatility has come down low enough that I can confidently build a business on this crypto, and you'll start to
Right.
see users and being willing to be paid in crypto for kind
Mhm.
of for the job they're doing and things like that. And so I think that that's kind of the general trend that we'll have to see for crypto to not just thrive but survive.
Yeah, I think that's a good, good explanation, for people who are really kind of at that cusp. And I would agree that we are at that layer. Fortunately, I lived through and was leading development teams in the early days of the internet when we were in that very case. And you're right. It was all about the tech and, kind of the underlying, because everybody needed to understand it to kind of be able to get it to the next level. You had that first, layer of disciples, it seemed like, that had to go
Mhm.
out and help the rest of the industry kind of get to the level of adoption that was the next layer, which is, you're exactly right. What Charles is talking about is how do you get to the next billion is going to be very critical, because that's going to be major adoption. Now you're getting into double digit adoption figures, maybe to a certain point in the next decade to 2 decades, where we could see the 50% adoption rate away from traditional fiats and all the traditional banking systems. So definitely one to watch. And the good thing is, everybody that's watching this show, you guys are very, very early on all of this stuff. So that kudos to you for, of course, recognize what's happening in blockchain. Pi Lanningham, great to have you over from SundaeSwap. Thanks for stopping in on the show today.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. All right, so you guys are tuned in right here on the podcast right now. If you're listening in over on iTunes or maybe over on Spotify, thanks for all the kudos. We appreciate that. But the number one thing you can do is jump right here to the YouTube channel, because it is the place where we're going to catch interviews like this, technical analysis, our own sentiment and amplification analysis on many of the tokens and projects that we follow, as well as some of our education tools. But another thing you need to do is join a thing called the Diamond Circle, and that is member-only content. It's also doing a lot of very, I think, cool things in the sense of giving back to you, and that is through digital asset rewards that we, of course, give back to our audience. We try to do that as often as possible. We're doing another one actually this week, I think, on Friday's live stream. So make sure and check it out. It's 3 p.m. Eastern time here on TechPath. If you guys have an idea for a show, just hit it in the comments below or hit me up on Twitter @PaulBarron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.